aiming to connect the Indian and German research innovation ecosystems, and we have a strong focus on technology transfer and startups, and this brings us to today's sessions, which we are undertaking today. We are offering diverse formats for information, for connecting incubators, for connecting entrepreneurs and startups, but one of our main aims is also to inform the audience, to inform our audience about ongoing trends in the startup ecosystems worldwide, with a strong focus on India and Germany, of course. But today's sessions brings you a broader outlook on the worldwide developments in the startup ecosystems, and I'm very glad to welcome our two speakers from Startup Genome. Startup Genome is actually providing one of the most comprehensive overview on the developments of the startup ecosystem worldwide. So we're going to have a bit of a worldwide outlook, but then also look up India and Germany against this worldwide trends. Startup Genome is advising governments and performs research, and it has advising also Indian and German federal states. Startup Mission Kerala is one of their clients, and also the state of North Rhine-Westphalia has been taking their information. They advised them, and I just saw yesterday that there is a nice little study on the system of North Rhine-Westphalia up on their website. The startup ecosystems, and I think our two speakers will give a bit of a closer outlook, but the startup ecosystem we have seen in the last years are cooling down and have seen a decrease in exits, but also in the unicorn worldwide, and this is also affecting India, of course. Nevertheless, governments continue to improve the framework conditions for startups and to invest in the startup system with a focus on research-based startup. As today, policymakers around the globe are counting on entrepreneurship and startups to provide the engine of economic growth. And this holds true for India and Germany as well. So Germany published last year a startup strategy, and a report on the implementation is just out in December. And what we're witnessing in Germany is at the moment a strong investment from the German government. We see new investment funds coming up. The news was out today that the German government will provide a new climate tech investment fund for startups, but also the framework conditions have substantially improved. And I think we'll also talk about talent today. Talent attraction is also one of the to-dos on the German government's lists. On the other side, we see also India, who has seen an increasing and a jump in the startup ecosystem, and the upcoming deep tech strategy of India, which is under consultation at the moment, definitely shows the importance of research and science-based startup, which is a bit the focus on today's outlook on. So the major shift in worldwide startup landscapes, we will look at this. What is changing at the moment? North America, of course, remains the forefront runner, but is also the Indian ecosystem in a crisis. How are the developments? Where are India and Germany placed in the worldwide competition in the field of innovation? And what might be also the new upcoming players in India and Germany? I think this would be a couple of questions and topics we are addressing in today's outlook on. Please put in your questions in the chat. We will take that up. So this is an interactive format. We're glad that for this outlook on, we have two analysts from Startup Genome with us. So we have Tanishq Malik, who is a senior business analyst from the India office. He specializes in providing crucial insights and recommendations for global stakeholders and ecosystems, and he actively collaborates with clients to generate essential and actionable roadmaps. I think that's quite important. It's not just about data, it's also about implementation. And he has prior experience as an investment analyst at Flybot Startups and Innovations. Our second speaker is Parth Arora. He's also a business analyst. He contributes to the assessment and strategy formulation of the ecosystems worldwide. And he collaborates extensively with partners, and he's providing also data to the global startup ecosystems. And he has worked on projects spanning ecosystems assessment, economic impact studies, and policy framework. So without any further ado, I would say, Tanishq, Parth, the floor is yours for the presentation and for the brief insight. And I'm looking forward to an engaging discussion afterwards. So please, to the audience, put all your questions into the chats. Now over to you, Tanishq and Parth.
Glad. Thank you for your kind words, Katya. Just give me a second.
Parth, you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, am I audible now?
You're not audible.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Okay, you're audible.
Okay, I am right. Yeah, could be some system issue. Yeah, yeah. Let me share my screen and show you the deck. Cool. Yeah. I think Ramneet, can you just allow me to share my screen and so that I can present the deck? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I hope my screen is visible and you can see the deck on the screen right now. So again, first of all, thank you, Katya, for all your kind words and for the good introduction of mine and Tanishq. Again, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending upon from wherever you are joining us. It's great to be with all of you here. And today in this presentation, Tanishq and I are going to present you a brief outlook on India and Germany and their performance in the global startup ecosystem. So this is what the agenda looks like for today. Starting off with who Startup Genome is, what we do, how were we founded, followed by some trends observed in the global startup ecosystem, about the global downturn, which Katya just talked about, and followed by, in the end, the performance of some top Indian and German ecosystems like Bangalore, Delhi, Munich, and Berlin. Now, if we start off with who Startup Genome is. Startup Genome, we were founded as a research firm in 2016, and today we are a policy advisory firm. Of course, we are still a research company as well. And till date, we have advised more than 150 innovation ministries or public agencies, and that's the number just for the last 4 years. We were founded by some serial entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley who noticed about 10 years ago that tech created a lot of wealth in the economies, but sadly, tech was incredibly lying in the top 10 ecosystems. So if I have to quote numbers, 93% of the value created by tech was just concentrated in the top 10 ecosystems. The number is down to 63% today, but still we have a long way to go in flattening this curve you can see on the screen right now. This brings me to our mission. The mission Startup Genome has is to bring knowledge, innovation to as many places in the world as possible so that founders, regardless of the location in their world, can participate in that very opportunity that tech ecosystems have to offer and so that they can scale up their operations to the next level. We have built the first and the only global knowledge network of the world, which supports evidence-based decision making for all the budding ecosystems. And more than 3 lakh founders and policymakers and other ecosystem leaders have supported us in this movement right from our inception. We have conducted founder surveys in more than 45 countries as of now and covered over a lakh startup founders and executives to arrive at the world's first evidence-based model to benchmark the performance of an ecosystem against its global and regional peers. Again, coming to our network, we operate a global network of cities, of ecosystems, of policy leaders, or more precisely, of anybody who wants to work towards the betterment and the development of their own ecosystem. It becomes important for scale up founders and other startup founders to have the required mentorship and the networks to grab the opportunity and scale their business to the next level. All right, I realize that. Now let's enough about us. Now I want to give you all a sneak peek about the preview of trends which were observed in the Global Startup Ecosystem Report 2023. For all your information, Startup Genome publishes an annual report and we judge the top ecosystems in the world and we rank them accordingly. And we have been doing this for the past 6 years now. Now, these are the rankings. These belong from the GSER 2023, so they are totally fresh from the data processing point of view. Not many big surprises at the top. We all know that Silicon Valley, New York City, and London have been the pioneers of tech in the past decade, and they continue to do so. Some changes towards the bottom, we can see Indian ecosystems like Bangalore rising to the top and arriving into the top 20 rankings, and Chinese ecosystems dipping a little further. As you can see, Beijing and Shanghai dipping a little down. Could be due to economic issues and some other COVID-related factors, which have made Chinese ecosystem lose their shine and luster a little bit, which is clearly reflective in our rankings. Again, we also want to give you a preview of more precise global data points like you can see on the screen. Global economic downturn is very clear in the numbers which we are tracking. You can see that exits over 50 million that we are tracking have seen its lowest level compared to what we have seen in the same quarter over the last 4 years. So it is very clear that the recession or like how we like to call it internally, the correction has hit and there are no surprises. VC fundings and deal amounts, the level which we have seen towards the end of 2022 in quarter four, is one of the lowest of which we have seen in the recent years. The data speaks for itself. This is not any argument or storytelling, and you may find similar arguments in many other presentations as well. Coming to funding, in terms of stages, it shows a slightly different picture. For late stage funding, the mega rounds have gone, at least for now. And for early stage funding, which is represented by the blue line on the screen, it is also getting affected, but not to that scale to which late stage funding has witnessed a decline. So for those amongst us who are looking out to build a business right now, that's a good news for us. We still have capital in the market. All we need is a good competitive business model. Not everything has dried up, which is very evident by the numbers you can look on the screen right now. Coming to the number of unicorns, the number of unicorns, as you can see on the screen, have dried up. All of us were in the last 2 years witnessing the creation of several unicorns in our own respective ecosystems. Uh, but today, the number is down to 12 in the first quarter of 2023, and it wouldn't be a really big surprise for us at Startup Genome to witness a negative growth rate in the next quarter as a result of a sharp cut in valuation by the investors. That's the sad reality, but again, that's where we are right now. Coming to the number of unicorns created per year, India and Germany have also witnessed a drop in the number of unicorns created due to the so-called correction in the global startup ecosystem. But even after the decline, the current levels of unicorn production have been sustained at a higher level than pre-COVID standards, as you can see on the screen. What this essentially means is that more and more competitive business models are emerging, and despite the global correction, they continue to raise funds and create value in their respective ecosystems. Now here comes the third section of our presentation, which is the emergence of deep tech ecosystems. We refer to deep tech based startups as the startups which require more technical development, like startups in the subsectors of artificial intelligence and big data, in clean tech, in cybersecurity. Over the recent years, we have seen a continuous rising trend in the deep tech deals globally, which were also, of course, affected a little bit by the globally happening correction in the venture capital space. As you can see on the screen, the share of deep tech has grown from 25% to 40%, roughly in terms of number of deals, and in terms of value, it has grown from 35% to 42%. Essentially, what that means is out of every dollar which is being invested into the startup ecosystem, 42 cents are going into a deep tech startup, and that should be a great insight if you're looking to start your own venture in the near time. Coming to the bubble chart on the screen right now, this is what we call the global subsector life cycle. One of the most important highlights we wanted to mention to you. Here, exits are on the horizontal axis. These are the matured companies in the market, and in the y-axis, we show the dynamics of new businesses coming in with the growth of Series A used as the yardstick to represent that growth. Any subsector which is towards the right top corner of this bubble chart would mean that matured companies exist in that subsector. Also, new budding companies are also existing. So, for example, if we can see slightly towards the center, we can see advanced manufacturing and robotics, which means that along with legacy companies, new and innovative production models are also coming in the venture capital space right now, which is a good news for all of us. Also, another no big surprise in AI and big data. We know AI and big data is ruling the world right now. All of us are probably aware about generative AI taking over the world, bots in numerous applications. But what is a good news for us, what we wanted to see as a firm, is a greater performance of clean tech. Clean tech having a good position in this bubble chart means that new clean tech models are coming in the startup space, which means people are finding new innovative ways to deal with the climate problem and find sustainable ways of creating revenue. And that's a great news for all of us, exactly what we wanted to see. Coming to our global research, we see that ecosystems which are relatively smaller in size due to their availability of resources have chosen to specialize in a handful of deep tech subsectors and punched way above their weight in developing products or services for those subsectors compared to their global ranking. This has helped these ecosystems grow tremendously, attract resources from other ecosystems, and develop a unique proposition for their own ecosystem. We can take the example of New Zealand in this case. You can see on the screen right now that in the overall rankings, New Zealand performs a little bit poorly. It has a global rank of about 77. But when we come to its subsector specialization, New Zealand is performing incredibly well in its AgTech and new food performance, and it has a subsector global ranking of 25 in that particular subsector. So it is clear that they're punching above their weight, and that is what attracts people, founders, and investors from all around the globe. Creating a deep tech specialization is marked differently a little bit from the traditional subsector specialization. Creating a deep tech specialization requires bridging and ramping between the traditional innovation ecosystem and the startup ecosystem for there to be success in that particular ecosystem. Now, what do I mean by the traditional ecosystem? Here we are talking about, of course, corporations, but also universities and research and development facilities in the ecosystem that enable all the people in that ecosystem to develop patents so that the IP they are using can be commercialized to support a startup and business model so that there is innovation in the deep tech that creates business value in the end. That's what matters for an ecosystem in the end. Again, here is an example of the subsector life sciences in which we can see how important it becomes for the intersection of traditional ecosystem with the startup ecosystem. The regression line which you can see on the screen right now is the baseline of performance between ecosystem knowledge, what we call the traditional innovation ecosystem performance, and startup ecosystem performance, which is a measure of how many startups are being created in a particular subsector. Anybody, any ecosystem who is lying above the blue line is doing much better to commercialize their IP developments into startups. A great example is San Diego, as you can see on the screen right now, the blue little dot towards the center of the graph. They are performing roughly above average in the traditional innovation ecosystem performance, but they are performing exceptionally well in the startup ecosystem performance. Now, what does this mean for us? What can we conclude? This simply implies that the ecosystem is doing much better than others in tapping on its commercialization of IP technologies into actual business revenue creating models.
We'd now like to tell you a little bit about what we've learned are the most important factors for the development of ecosystems, the frameworks that we use to assess them, and how we help our members across the world. There are two principal frameworks that we use. One is the ecosystem lifecycle model, and the second is the startup success factor model. Like human beings, ecosystems also evolve over predictable trajectories. When we analyzed over 100 different startup ecosystems from around the world, we realized that they have specific characteristics that are different from each other and that are in continuum. So they are achieved one after another. The first phase is activation. The second is globalization. The third phase is attraction. And the fourth is integration. The vast majority of startup ecosystems right now are in the activation phase, whereas once they have enough resources to produce more startups, they perform more highly, they move on to subsequent phases of the ecosystem lifecycle. The four phases are described by the characteristics they exhibit. Vast majority of ecosystems are right now in the activation phase with fewer than 1,000 startups. Very few people in these ecosystems have built startups before, so there is very limited startup ecosystem experience, and they face key challenges such as resource leakage to more advanced ecosystems. As these ecosystems grow in size and complexity, they slowly start to exhibit challenges associated with later phases, such as globalization and attraction, till an ecosystem reaches its full potential in the integration phase, where they where there are limited to no gaps in resources and success factors. Determining the phase of any ecosystem helps us in prioritizing the most appropriate action to take for the most direct impact. For example, what we've seen across many activation phase ecosystems is there is no well established local startup community. The ecosystem isn't very well connected. There is also limited funding available for early stage startups, and high potential startups are not being scaled effectively. So, the core objective of these of this phase immediately becomes to address these challenges and gaps through different programs, such as launching keystone teams, improving the early stage funding environment, and supporting startups through different acceleration and incubation programs. As the ecosystem evolves, it requires addressing of different challenges, such as helping startups become globally competitive in later phases till the ecosystem gets completely integrated into the economy. Our second model, which is our success factor model, has been developed over years of experimenting and research with more than 100 different metrics that are all important for any startup ecosystem's growth. We've been able to narrow it down to a handful of 10 metrics, which have the most direct impact to the performance of any startup ecosystem. These are divided into two broad categories: the local factors and the global factors. Local success factors are the most important at the early stages of ecosystem growth to support the development of a thriving community. A larger startup community creates enough critical mass to advance to the next stages of the startup ecosystem growth. Global success factors become critical in later stages of ecosystem lifecycle model, and these are measured through metrics such as global market reach and global connections to top ecosystems. One of the most important success factors for any ecosystem is local connectedness. From what we've seen, this metric measures how cohesive an ecosystem is. It highlights how well founders are connected and also other ecosystem stakeholders are connected with each other, such as investors, mentors, advisors, and it also measures how helpful these ecosystem stakeholders are towards each other. An analysis of over 3,000 startups surveyed globally by Startup Genome to study the relationship between local connectedness and the startup's growth revealed that the revenue for startups which were well connected locally grew twice as fast as startups with a local connectedness. The two most important global success factors we measure are global connectedness and global market reach. Global connectedness measures how well a founder is connected to other founders in top ecosystems, while global market reach analyzes what proportion of the startup's customer base are from outside their country. Both these metrics display a positive correlation with each other and also the ecosystem value. As founders are better connected to their peers in top ecosystems, the exchange of resources such as knowledge, ideas, mentorship, and funding unlocks the potential of producing globally leading startups. We see that ecosystem towards the top right of the chart have higher ecosystem value as they are more well connected. There are a few notable exceptions towards the bottom left as well. The big circle in the bottom left is Beijing, which mainly caters to its local market, but by and large, for startups to sell beyond their borders for scaling, they should be well networked and more connected to founders in other ecosystems and in leading ecosystems as well. A recent analysis from Startup Genome's Scale Up report also revealed that startups with a robust global network are 3 times more likely to skyrocket to success. So the essence of global connectedness is really important. We'll now also look at some Indian and German startup ecosystems and how well they perform across these metrics and also try to benchmark them against some global peers. We've observed that Indian and German ecosystems are rising in the rankings over the last 4 years. As we also continue to update our methodologies to take into account various ecosystem success factors such as funding, talent, and ecosystem experience, we obtain more data and we see these ecosystems thriving in all these aspects. Berlin has risen from rank 16 to rank 13, and also Frankfurt has seen a similar growth. Uh, while ecosystems in India, such as Delhi and Bangalore, have been on an upward trajectory, making their way into the top 30 ecosystems of the world. Comparing the German and Indian ecosystems to London, we see Bangalore and Berlin have struggled to achieve significant exits. On the other hand, Frankfurt and Delhi boast a substantial proportion of their ecosystem value being derived from successful exits. A healthy ecosystem needs an active funnel of young and scaling companies as well as exit activity so that it can help drive reinvestment of funds and expertise into the ecosystem, which drives the ecosystem flywheel. When we look at global connectedness, we see more mature ecosystems such as Bangalore and Berlin having high global connectedness, which roughly translates them to having high global market reach as well. However, in the case of Bangalore, we do see a lot of business models still catering to the Indian market. Meanwhile, in developing Indian and German ecosystems such as Delhi and Frankfurt, we see slightly lower levels of global connectedness and global market reach. We see a similar proportion of founders claiming to have globally leading products across Indian and German ecosystems. Having a globally unique product is essential for any startup to unlock their scaling potential to generate more value. This proportion across Indian and German ecosystems is impressive. However, looking at other leading ecosystems, such as London and Toronto, exhibit potential for increasing this proportion as these ecosystems will mature in their life cycle. In terms of local connectedness, we see German ecosystems exhibiting a strong local community as compared to most of their peers. It is important to note that Delhi was omitted from this chart due to absence of enough valid responses to create a statistically significant metric, which would give us an accurate representation of the local connectedness in Delhi. However, we do notice Bangalore's local connectedness index seems to be on the lower end of this peer set. But to give this some more context, the global average for local connectedness index is at 6. So Bangalore is almost at par with it. When we look at the underlying factors of local connectedness, which is the relationship index and the sense of community index, we see that founders in Bangalore, Berlin, and Frankfurt, they're well connected with each other. They have a good amount of relations with each other founders and stakeholders. However, founders in Bangalore do not receive as much help from their peers, their stakeholders, as we see in Berlin or Frankfurt. So I think a lot of what we have seen here today is relevant to what is being done. And here are my 3 big takeaways. We should continue to focus on IP development to keep building stronger deep tech startup ecosystems as they have huge potential and a lot of application to the current market problems. The importance of connectedness is essential, whether it is local or global. We should keep helping our fellow founders, whether they're sitting next to us or sitting across the seas. We've seen that the data clearly suggests that helping each other and building a stronger global community will help the advancement of all ecosystems. And the work being done here at the German Center for Research and Innovation is also a great catalyst to that cause. Thank you so much for having us, and I hope this was informative for all members of the audience.
Thanks so much for that, highlights from the report, and also a bit of more going into detail and more data which is available. It was really interesting to see. I would like to start with a couple of questions which we pick up from the chat and also. You're talking about global connectiveness and local connectiveness. Is local connectiveness meant the connectivity in this local startup ecosystem in Bangalore or in Munich itself, or would you look also to connectivities in proximity to other ecosystems? So the connectivity between Frankfurt and Berlin, for instance. So how you define the startup system, because I've seen on one hand New Zealand and we've seen Frankfurt, Delhi, Bangalore. So what is the level you do the analysis on?
Yeah. For defining an ecosystem, we mainly look at the 100-kilometer radius from the center of any ecosystem, because we believe all the stakeholders for any ecosystem need to be within a 100-kilometer radius for it to be effective and for people to have effective relations. When we talk about local connectedness, we look at we basically run a survey in any ecosystem we're assessing, and we understand how well the founders are connected with each other. We ask them how many relationships do you have with other founders, other advisors, and investors, and we also try to understand how much help in terms of number of hours are they receiving from these stakeholders for non-monetary benefits, of course. So by this, we are able to understand how well connected the stakeholders are within the ecosystem, and also how much are they willing to help each other. So this gives us a really good idea of local connectedness in any ecosystem. And for global connectedness, what we usually measure is how well ecosystems or how well founders in any ecosystems are connected to the top leading ecosystems across the world, across different geographies. The 6 ecosystems that we consider for this metric are uh, Silicon Valley, New York, Berlin, London, Tel Aviv, and Shanghai. And of course, for founders in Berlin, they would obviously be connected to other founders in Berlin. But when we're calculating this, we take this calculation into account, and we basically assign them weightages to get as accurate of a presentation as possible, so the numbers aren't very skewed. So that is how we measure both these metrics, and that is how we're able to get a sense of the success that these factors bring to any ecosystem.
Thanks for that. I think that's a very fundamental question, and maybe we kick it off with that from the chat. If the data you provide, can it be used for research projects? How you handle the data? I mean, you have a huge data set can a researcher access your data, or how would that go if one would look to have a more detailed look into the data?
Well, of course, commenting on the first part of the question, the data is, of course, used for research projects internally at startups. We publish a number of reports based on that data. I mean, not sure if you're already aware of the Global Startup Ecosystem Report. That's an annual report. We are doing it from the past 6 years, and we also do some subsector-based reports like the Climate Tech Report, the FinTech Report. Along with that, we are also doing a special scale-up report, which caters to the secret behind scale-up success. So to answer the first part of question, yeah, the data is definitely used to create research projects and to create valuable insights for founders across the world. Coming to the second part of question, whenever a founder is entering a survey or he or she is putting in his or her valuable inputs, we also promise to them that the data is totally confined with us and won't be shared with any other third party team or member to get their confidence and to get as real insights as possible.
So no open access data, more for your own research and
Yeah,
so
to be
okay,
precise.
good. I think we have an interesting question regarding the local ecosystems. There is Andreas Apfelbecher, who's from Fraunhofer, actually in Munich. So you did not mention Munich as an interesting ecosystem for startups. So in the German landscape, so where it is standing and why not? Do you have any insights why it's not performing as good as Bangalore, for instance?
Well, first, to answer this question, we can come to the point what strength Bangalore has, and we can lead on that. Bangalore has incredible strength. As we all know, in India, Bangalore is doing great in its unicorn production. It has created the goal for Bangalore is to create, as per the government, is to create 50 fintech unicorns by 2030, and that's a great deal. Meanwhile, Munich is also doing great in fintech. As per our latest data, 1 out of every 3 startups in Munich was associated with fintech, directly or indirectly with fintech and insurtech. But the gaps lie in the abilities for these ecosystems to be more connected internally, as Tanish mentioned, to have more local connections and then scaling their connections to the next level, which can unlock the global potential for these startups.
And I mean, maybe a question from my side. So we saw Delhi, we saw Berlin, we saw Bangalore, so the usual suspects. What are the upcoming systems for Germany and for India? We've seen Frankfurt, which is performing well in a specific sector, but what would you say would be the upcoming hubs in the two countries which are not in the third, but then maybe in the next batch of the evaluation?
Well, commenting on the first part of the question first, in India, we all know about how Bangalore and Delhi are performing greatly. But if we jump onto ecosystems beyond this, I think Mumbai in India is considered to be a great ecosystem. It's the fintech hub of India. So one answer to that question would be Mumbai. It's producing great fintech value. A lot of fintech investment banking companies are based in Munich. The traditional ecosystem, as we talked about, can be tapped for the startup ecosystem value. Another ecosystem to be named in India would be Hyderabad, again doing extremely well, an IT hub for the country again. And talking about Germany, Berlin and Munich, Berlin and Frankfurt, we've already talked about are doing well. And to name a couple of questions, to name a couple of ecosystems, we can say Munich definitely. Munich has also witnessed a rise in its global system rankings. A rise is not influenced by just a couple of factors, but if an ecosystem performs well throughout a list of factors, like it's performing well, the funding landscape is good, the policies are good, that only leads to the rise in the global ecosystem ranking for that ecosystem. So yeah, Munich to name one in Germany, and Mumbai and Hyderabad to name a few in India.
Okay, good. That's great to know. Now, let's maybe shift a bit from the regional and local hubs and to see a bit more into the topics, because a couple of questions are running in
Okay.
on the subsectors, because you have this interesting graph also on the rising sectors, major growth, and the declining sectors. So there was one question in the chat who was wondering why life science is still under 50% growth and low in value. I think that comes also from the background that India has a strong focus on life sciences and has been investing through BIRAC, DPT, and so on. So do you have any explanation why life science is not so performing well at the moment as other sectors, which we saw in the blue bubbles on your slide?
Yeah, first of all, to the audience, I would like to make it clear that the blue bubbles on the chart, the y-axis was showing the increase in the performance on those ecosystem, not the absolute value. So, for example, if we know that life sciences was performing already to a great extent, then the rise would have been low. Though in absolute terms, it would have been great, but the comparison would have been low as compared to other subsectors. So, if you want more clarity on that, in our GSER 2023, we also have the same chart, which is based on the count of deals of these ecosystems. So that might present a more better overview to the question which the viewer has.
So as it's not, a system might not seeming to perform well because there is not the growth, but it has been already on a very, very high level.
Yeah, that's just based on the value. Maybe the graph based on the count might show you a totally different picture.
Do you have data available to see which sector is performing well in which country or in which ecosystems? And if yes, do you see some matches between the Indian and German ecosystem where they say there's a good match which are on growth on both of the sides?
Yeah,
I mean, okay.
yeah, we don't have, we don't like, we publish some reports which specialize in different subsectors. We recently published a climate tech report as well, and we keep publishing these different reports which highlight which ecosystems are performing well across different subsectors. In terms of common strengths, what we've observed among India and Germany, I would say fintech is definitely one where a lot of unicorns in both the countries are being produced in the fintech space. For India, we have Cred, and from Germany, in Berlin only, we also see N26. So there are definitely strengths. I feel the common strength among these ecosystems, I feel, is in India. Parth, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, sorry for the delay. Adding on to that point, that's exactly the common stretch with Indian and German ecosystems have. For example, in German ecosystem, we recently had VFox, which is an insurtech platform, raise a 400 million massive Series D round, which valued them at about $4.1 billion. So when deals of such scale happen in an ecosystem, it's a clear indication of how well that particular subsector is performing. And again, coming to Bangalore, it's the home to a lot of fintech-based unicorns, like Tanishq already mentioned. There is Cred and a lot of other unicorns as well. So yeah, that would be one common strength based on our data.
Okay, thank you so much for that insight. Let me take up one question, which is actually for us, how we connect India and Germany better, and this global connectivity is so important. So we as German Center for Research and Innovation try at the moment to connect the systems, and we do this through connecting the incubators. So there was in the presentation at the last slide the strengths on IP and on the deep tech and everything which is outcoming of research, and this is our focus in the German Center for Research and Innovation. Now, we not try to connect startups to startups because that's quite difficult to find a perfect match. But what we are doing currently is connecting the research incubators in Indian higher education institutions and research institutions in Germany, bring them together, connect them. And I think then to have also local outreach, as of course the incubators would be connected locally very well, and then to discuss what would be formats of exchange and knowledge exchange, what we do actually in this session, to raise the awareness, what is ongoing, and to see good matches and bring people together on one platform. I think what we're still lacking is in connecting and global connectivity is funding programs, especially in the early stage. We all know that in the early stage, startups depend in the tech and deep tech sector heavily on public funding. And I think there we still miss some programs to connect and to enable early stage connectivities between the ecosystems, especially when we look into deep tech. And I think there was also one question, no, there are no programs in place yet. We are working towards that, but I think that's also about raising the importance and the sensitivity of this. And I think here the report helps to say it's not just local connectivity, it's also at the end global connectivity, which then needs to scaling up and also to market access in a way. I found in the report when I went through it very interesting that Germany is performing a bit better in early stage than in the exits and in the ACE areas. Do we have any explanation for that? As for India, it seems to be a bit different. Danish, could you have a word on that? So the down or the decrease has not been so much seen in the early stage. We have seen more in the exits and in the exits and in the A funding series.
Yeah, we have been analyzing this trend. We also have been working with another German ecosystem currently, which is North Rhine-Westphalia, and we're seeing this trend there as well. We've seen this trend somewhat prevail in that ecosystem as well, that although startups are being produced, they're maybe not being scaled very effectively. And if they're not being scaled very effectively, it's creating a gap within the exits in the ecosystem. So we have this pyramid model, which basically measures how large the base is of any ecosystem. It measures how many startups are being created within an ecosystem, and then how many are able to progress to the next stage, which is being able to raise an early stage round, seed or Series A. How many are then able to raise a Series B round or any scaling round, the late stage funding, and then how many of them are able to get to successful exits. So in that area, we are definitely seeing some gaps. So maybe the scaling pipelines might not be that effective. Maybe there is some support lacking there. So I think a good way to fill this gap would be increasing entrepreneur support in later stages.
Okay, so advocacy for more also public money in the later stages, and not just focusing on the early stage and running research grants and then letting them off.
Yeah.
I would have a question more from my German perspective. In the report, you stated that we see a decrease in China activities, no? So there was quite a fall, and then India is quite stable. Will India overtake China in the next, let's say, 5 years? What is your prediction? We've seen it in population, we see it in economic growth, but in the field of startups. So is India going to be pretty soon the second largest startup ecosystem in the world?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's an interesting question. I hope my answer suits the hopes of the audience well. We all know that the Indian ecosystem is performing well, and due to some macroeconomic reasons, Chinese ecosystems like Beijing and Shanghai have witnessed a dip in their rankings. Though it is again important to note that Beijing and Shanghai were, from the earlier times, the rulers of the global startup ecosystem. Both have been performing exceptionally well in the top 10 to 15 rankings of the global startup ecosystem. So, yeah, But looking at the growth rate, Indian ecosystems like Bangalore and Delhi have been performing incredibly well, have been trying to tap on this opportunity, which we have seen as this global recession or the correction, like we call it. So, yeah, India is growing tremendously well. China has witnessed a little bit of a downturn, but for us, it may be no big surprise that if any of the ecosystems overtake each other, more particularly India.
Yeah,
Okay,
also just adding
that's why
on to that, sorry to cut you in between, but just
no,
adding
no,
on to that,
go ahead. Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of investment in India, at least being put into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Recently, with the budget, also India, the finance ministry announced a 1 lakh crore budget to provide loans, provide interest-free or very minimal interest rate loans for 50 years for to basically support the research and development in deep tech especially. And Indian government is also taking some steps to incorporate deep tech into the public sphere as well. So definitely we're seeing a lot of investment in India, at least in developing deep tech and developing these deep tech specializations. So definitely, things are changing, and hopefully for the best.
Okay, let's see how the trend is. You have a life cycle for good reasons. No, you never know where the cycle is standing and where not. I found it interesting if you take a life cycle model and then the four stages you have in there, like from the initial phase and then the growth phase and so on. And you mentioned in your presentation that most of the ecosystems are still in the initiating phase. Now global connectiveness comes a bit on a later stage. So how would you see it in the case for the Indian and German local systems you are looking at? How or what is the percentage of them ready to connect globally? I mean, if I would take Sikkim, most likely not. But how ready you see the systems to take the next steps, so to come out of this initiation phase and then to take also the steps and to connect globally, because that might not be done in the first stage of the process.
Yeah, I think I can take that on. Now, this is something which is not particular to India or Germany, but this is something which we have observed in ecosystem across the world. The US might be a little bit of an exception to this, but even in India, if you consider, there are only a handful of top ecosystems like Bangalore, Delhi. If you move a little bit away from Delhi towards the other states in India, ecosystems present there are at a very nascent stage, at a very early phase of activation, have a very low startup output. Startup output is the number of startups existing in that ecosystem. So if they were to directly aim at increasing their global connectedness, the right way for them to go would be to increase their local connectedness first, to establish a good domestic network, to have a good reach in their own ecosystem. India offers a huge domestic market, so they can tap on the opportunities it offers. And once it is established, then the next step forward for them should be to go for the global share and to have a good number of global connections.
So first connect locally and then take it global. That's
Go
I
step by
think
step.
that's good. Or take it in a network global and local, like the DVH
Yeah, exactly.
doing. Good. Thanks for that insight. So I think there is a discussion about automotive engineering markets of Germany and possible connects with the Indian startups, which is go more into manufacturing. No, I mean we talked a lot about deep tech. No, in
Mhm.
Germany, production 2.0, 4.0, land of manufacturing. Would you see a strength of Germany in the manufacturing field?
Yeah, I mean, talking about developments in manufacturing, we've already talked about deep tech. There have been great advances in the ways we are producing things, in the machinery technology ways. And let's take an example of, uh, an Indian ecosystem like Hyderabad or let's say Delhi. Fintech is the obvious strength of this ecosystem, but after fintech come the deep tech subsectors in which they are developing their own specialization. And the top ranker in that is, of course, advanced manufacturing and robotics, or Industry 4.0, as we like to call it. There are pioneers in this field in the world. For example, in the US, there is Detroit, which is also called the garage of the world because of its leadership abilities in the Industry 4.0 in the deep tech space. But yeah, Indian ecosystems are also performing well, enhancing on their subsector, deep tech specialization, and aspiring to go up and upwards in this ranking.
Good. Tanishq, you would like to add on this, or we will leave it?
Yeah, for Germany, definitely, I think automotive engineering can be a strength. We see so many German car brands, ruling the world. So definitely, as Parth also explained, how we can make a traditional or how we can make a deep tech ecosystem is by connecting the bridges between the traditional ecosystem. So the traditional corporates, the big corporates, these manufacturing centers, and by basically connecting them to the deep tech sector, the deep tech specializations, the IP being developed, and by in the intersection of these two is where really you can build the specialization. So definitely in Germany also we see there's a lot of potential for developing a deep tech specialization in automotive or car manufacturing. In India also maybe the specialization is probably going to be more towards electronic vehicles, EVs. We recently saw a very large round of a Bangalore-based startup. The name is skipping me, but they raised a big amount, and their valuation is almost close to $500 million. So definitely, there are investments being made into the EV space as well, as we also saw from some snippets of the recent budget as well.
Yeah, that leads me maybe to my last question, looking into talent. No, this was also named in the report, and it's one of your factors. So you're keying in when you look at ecosystems. No, we all know that India has a tremendous force of the STEM talent. No, there's more than, I think, 2.1 million people every year graduating from the STEM field, whereas we in Germany we have a lack of talent, and we're looking for talent. So would you say that skilled workforce and talent is strengths in the Indian system, and where Indian systems, and where you would see is the strengths comparatively in the leading ecosystems in Germany?
Well, yeah, certainly I would like to comment on that. First of all, that's a great insight and a great question from the audience, from whoever it was. And coming to the points of number of STEM students in these countries, this is a really important metric for an ecosystem. And this is also one of our underlying metrics in which gets in the way of calculating the global startup ecosystem ranking. So yes, this is definitely acknowledged. And talking about this as a strength, yes, this is extremely important for an ecosystem, but what becomes more important for an ecosystem is to tap on its advantage of having a high number of STEM students. For example, enabling the students to get the right kind of opportunities in the universities, getting the right time, the right policies, the right incentives to commercialize their IP, as we talked about, to convert their developments into more patents in the ecosystem so that they can convert these and commercialize it into actual revenue creating business models. That's what matters in the end, and that's where the ecosystems can take an advantage. Thanks for that if you want to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, across the talent board, we see all these ecosystems, I think, performing fairly similar. When we look at our ecosystem rankings, the rankings for the talent factor are pretty similar across top Indian and German ecosystems. So developing like a good culture of research, providing everyone incentives and motivating everyone to commercialize their research, go public with their research, I think is the right way to go in bridging these gaps.
Good. So it's not just about the pool of talents, it's also enabling them and driving them forward. So if you just have a pool of talents, this is not helpful. You should develop programs. I think that's a good end of the discussion for us as Center of Research and Innovation, looking into research and innovation and trying to build exactly that bridge. So for me, it remains to say thank you to you, Parth and Tanishq. I recommend the audience definitely to have a look into the report. Post report here in the chat also. There's a lot of data available, and one can have a closer look into local systems. So for every local system, there's basically a page where one could look up where the system is standing. So this would definitely recommend who wants to look a bit more into the data, and also to the website on Startup Genome to see there are a couple of specialized report. The scale-up report was mentioned, but also the report on North Rhine-Westphalia is uploaded. So I think there's a lot of data available, even if not the whole data set. So thanks so much for providing these insights. For me, it remains to the audience to say have a look at our website from the German Center for Research Innovation. We had a couple of questions on funding programs, policy papers, and so on. This all you can find with a focus on India and Germany on our website. And then stay tuned maybe for one of our next events where we will continue and discuss the topic and take that forward. But for today, thanks so much, Parth, Tanishq, for the presentation and the insights. And thanks so much to the audience for all the questions which were asked. And then I wish every day a very nice evening, or for those who are connected from Germany, very nice day ahead.
You too. Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Have a
thank you
good
so
day.
much for having us. It was amazing being here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.